As always, it is my pleasure that you join me for today's podcast of Second Chance Coaching. My name is Dr. Richard Lewis. If you'd be so kind as to leave me a rating and your feedback, I would very much appreciate it, and it will help others like you to optimally discover this podcast wherever you listen to this and your other favorite podcast. As you know, at Second Chance Coaching, we focus on seeing everyday life through the eyes of the returning citizen and highlighting the resiliency of the human spirit. I would love to work with you one-on-one, whether you're a returning citizen or coaching client seeking your second chance, or you're a representative of a business, college, or university seeking to integrate and support returning citizens in your respective organizational and learning environments. Please feel free to contact me via email at richard@secondchancecoaching.com or via Instagram at the Dr. Richard Lewis. Welcome again to another edition of Second Chance Coaching. As always, we are so happy, and it is my pleasure that you've joined us on another week of your reentry journey from whichever corner of the marvelous world you're listening from. And we continue to remain humble and excited that you've decided to spend part of your week with us. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Well, how is your week going this week? I hope everything is going all right. Over here, we're finishing up grading for session 2. I was happy that one of my students who was struggling a bit with the speech projects decided to sit there and really hunker down and bring his grade to an acceptable grade. And by doing some of the makeup speeches, he was willing to get out of his comfort zone and speak to other students that were not in his speech class, to do those speech classes in different speech settings. So I was really proud of him as far as what it is that he decided to do to get a really good grade. In addition to that, whether it be at the job or at the airport, at some of the other schools that I'm teaching at, it seems like simultaneously there's been so much change at all of these places of employment, and when that happens, I try to just look around with an observant eye and try not to say too much, and I try to confine my venting to just a really few people that I may share my thoughts with. But overall, I just try to be a really good listener to coworkers who want to vent their frustrations, let their stuff out about observations that they've seen and current events that's going on at the job. But ultimately, whether it's me or them, we don't have any real control over what's happening, especially when it's happening many levels above us. As life goes on and as you get more experience in your professional life and you look back on the things that have happened and what you think that is going to be an emergency or the world's going to come to an end, it never really happens. But when this type of change takes place, I think about really how has these changes affected me in the past. And sometimes they've affected me for the good. It's been for the better of my experience at that particular organization. But I also have those memories about how past changes really affected me in a not so good way, in a bad way. And especially when those changes directly affect me. And I know I'm just not on by myself on this one. I'm sure there have been instances where you've really gone through it as well. Like I'm sharing with you now, I've certainly gone through it. And when that happens, this is when we could get frustrated, we could get angry, we could get upset. And sometimes that anger, when things affect us in a negative way, that anger could stick with us and persist in what, quote unquote, what seems to be an eternal burning flame. Like, you ever have those things where you're just mad about it all the time, that the minute that subject comes up, you just get mad about it. Like it never resolved itself. You just continue to stay pissed off about it. Naturally, we become angry when things or injustices are done against us, or when we're quote unquote being done dirty. If you check the podcast archives, we did a podcast episode almost 2.5 years ago. Pretty much, well, let me look it up. Exactly. The episode was released exactly on June 9th, 2021, and it was called Being Done Dirty. And we talked about how we deal with injustices that come along the reentry journey and that come along our lives. In that episode, if you recollect, and certainly you could hear about it more in the archives, in that episode, we talked about the behavior of bad actors. We call them bad actors. How bad actors, when they behave badly, that behavior is really about them. It's really not about you. In that episode, I was able to discuss the case that commenced my criminal justice journey, and even expressing forgiveness for the situation and for the former friend that put me in that position. And really, that anger really doesn't persist. I could talk about that situation and not particularly feel angry about it. The other situation I spoke about was speaking about another former friend who borrowed money from me and has never paid that money back. To this day, still hasn't paid that money back. Now, is it hard to say I've forgiven him? Yeah, it's hard to say I've forgiven him. You know, I've spoken to other people in our circle that are familiar with his situation, and although it didn't make it easier for me, it put it into context as to kind of the situations he got himself into. Um, so I can't say so much forgiven him, but I could say I've gotten past it. You know, but I know you may think, well, how come? How can you get past it? Well, I know he's never going to give me my money back. And in never giving me my money back, as I said in that episode, I'm okay with disqualifying him from my life. But in addition, I won't be ashamed to say to people in our circles what his behavior was and what it is that he did. Not in an effort to embarrass him. It's certainly not to embarrass him, but it's really more so for me to not be ashamed that I helped someone who I thought was a friend, and it was them who proved themselves to not be worthy of my friendship. Through their actions, they did that. So I should not be ashamed of my good intentions when they came up short. And that's what it is that I have no problem owning. I also mentioned in that episode another former friend who I helped get a job at the college, and we also had a falling out. That situation still not been resolved. We still are not on speaking terms. And although it bothers me, I choose to just get past that too. It's like, you know what, that person is who they're going to be, and karma is going to catch up with them, and they're going to be in a situation where that the universe is going to be like, nope, you have to answer for what you did. And I also talked about two other blowouts I had with other friends at the time. Those two friends, those relationships have been pretty much more healed. One friend, the relationship is most definitely healed, but the funny thing is, the other friend came back into my life as she was seeking advice and moral support for intense family dynamics that they have going on right now. Now, it's funny. Well, let me say this. It's not that it's funny that they're going through tough family dynamics. I wouldn't want to wish that on anybody. But it's funny that the same presence I wanted to be for my mother and my family, she would give me a really hard time for being there for my family. We were friends, but we were also in the midst of trying, going through a second or third time trying to date again. And she would always talk about, well, your family should stand on their own 2 feet. They should be able to take care of themselves. She was just very like, oh no, I'm just kind of, they should do them and I should do me. And that just really never vibed with me. Maybe that was one of the reasons why we didn't pursue staying together, and where we ended up having a blowout. And but now I look at them, the same position that they would criticize me for in being there for my family, they are in this same position where they have to be selfless for their family. But even in her being selfless for her family, she still complains a lot about what's going on. Some of it's legitimate, some of it's legitimate that, the complaints are going on. But some of it, I feel like, you know what, you could take it for the team. This is your family you're talking about. But I see that she sees that being there requires more strength than she expected to have. And quite honestly, I see that her patience is being stretched really thin. Now, there's that part of me that looks at that says to myself, now looking to see that they now know what it's like, and they have to eat they eat their words from not too many years before of saying, well, Richard, you should just do your own thing. But at the end of the day, what difference does it make to have that quote unquote I told you so conversation? It doesn't make a difference. Now, unlike being done dirty, if there's situations that are unresolved, especially when one feels there's been a particular injustice performed against them, yeah, anger could persist. And why is that? Because there's really no place for that anger to go. There was no resolution to the situation. A lot of times we look for the resolution to the situation from that person or from that entity for them to acknowledge that they were wrong. Hopefully that could be the beginning of saying, okay, you know what? We're in a place, we're in a better place where I can get past it. But a lot of times we have to take control of getting past it because a lot of times the people that have done us wrong are not going to be in a place where they're going to recognize where what they did. So we are in control of that, and so we have to sit there and do that. When one, and whether you haven't been able to execute it on your own or haven't been able to make that peace with someone else, when one feels that there's no resolution and there's still anger with the situation, from the outside looking in, people could look at you and say, wow, this cat is bitter. They just have an acid grind. Or as someone has said about me recently at work, it came back to me. He's quote unquote disgruntled. My response to that, of course, was visceral. I said, yeah, I'm disgruntled because what I detailed or what I told you what was happening wasn't resolved. And there was no acknowledgement of that person's wrongdoing to this very day. So, of course, if you want to say I'm disgruntled, yeah, of course I am. And I think about that because right now I'm working on a crucial project, regarding faculty, and it's requiring us work with our partners across the aisle from student services, specifically working with some people who absolutely mistreated me when I was there, and they mistreated me on the way out. The administrator from student services who wasn't there during the time I was there, he was the one kind of negotiating and trying to broker a peace to say, hey, can we make sure that we work together and give folks across the aisle a chance, asking me to do that. I expressed myself with as much raw honesty as I possibly could, just really unadulterated, just straight raw honesty, because I truly did not want to work with the person. But I knew that in order to get this job done, I would have had to work with them. But I said, I'm going to express how it is that I feel. Because even though that administrator was advocating for that person, said the person's owning how they feel, they're concerned that they feel that you're not going to want to work with them because of what they did. I said, they should feel that way. They should feel that concern because they were not a good person. They're not a good person right now. Even if he's owning what he's done and even they're trying to do better and have a second act as being a better person, at the end of the day, I told that administrator, that person has not changed. They're just being a better version of themselves. They're just trying to be a better version of who they really are. And there's nothing, at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a better version of who you are, that's fine. But at the same time, too, don't expect me to sit there and open my arms and say, yes, you're better, or you're being better, or you're acting better. So yeah, let me be a part of your rehab tour. Now, that sounds funny to say, let me be part of your rehab tour. There's a podcast on second chances. But I said, okay, I'll give him a second chance. I'll give him a chance. I still see him a certain way, but I'll give him that chance. Now, why was I disgruntled leaving student services? Not all of my experience in student services were bad. Working with my bachelor's folks, they were the most honorable and wonderful people to work with to this day. I still feel that way about them. Now, but when I worked in general advising and I led that unit, I had to go through, that staff went through numerous changes in leadership, probably because of their own doing. And when I got there, I really got to see why that was the case. Among other things, there were numerous resistance movements regarding one's work schedules, equitable work schedules, how to document your advising appointment, how to sit there, how long that advising appointment should be, and how we did business on an everyday basis. There was resistance everywhere. And it was just such a cantankerous and immature staff. And to this day, there's a majority of them that are still acting the same way. I hear that they're still acting the same way. So in hindsight, could I have gotten past a very cantankerous and immature staff? Sure. I mean, of course I could, because that's what people are. You get over that. But what was hard for me, what persisted in me having my anger towards me, was the complete lack of support and sabotage that took place against me by the senior leadership that was 2 levels above me. They knew what that staff was, and they continued to support that type of dysfunction and not support the leadership policies that I was executing on behalf of them. The sabotage in leadership not only took place in that instance, but took place a few years before that when I was leading an academic unit. And in this case, this was a staff primarily of folks who were tenured faculty, and they were acting so entitled that I could see why people from outside the world of education desire to have tenure as an employment benefit eliminated, because it's people like this that would abuse their power. They would abuse the benefit in which they had. Tenure is designed to say, you know what? I need to protect academic freedom. So if I say something that you and I don't agree with, then my employment status should not be based upon what it is that I've taught or what I'm researching or what it is that I'm sharing with the academic community. But a lot of times people use their tenure as a way to say, this is how I'll mistreat you. This is how I'll express vitriolic feelings and actions towards you. It just becomes really an abuse of power, so to speak. Now, was everyone on the staff like this? Of course not. Not everybody was that way. Sometimes, when they say one bad apple spoils a bunch, in this case, it was only 3 bad apples for the most part, spoiling the bunch. And what does the rest of the staff do? They put themselves in a position where you might have other people who are in cahoots undercover with their behavior, or some people that are just trying to work and just trying to maintain their survival. A lot of times at the time that I was there, people were like, oh my goodness, it's just Richard. But in the time since I've left, the associate dean who came and left at that time has said that the staff was impossible to deal with. There was new faculty that came in, lasted 1 year, and quit right away because they're like, nah, this is not something I want to deal with. And what were some of those issues there? Some of the same things that I dealt with in student services, fighting about work schedules, the fact that as a leader, I wouldn't bow down to nepotism, things that they wanted to have done. And they're just being offended by that the inmates were not running the asylum, so to speak, that they had to realize that there was one person in charge of the department and it wasn't them. But just like in student services, I can accept that there are people who don't like to work, that are just lazy and really look to swerve and take the easy way out. But once again, my disappointment was in the leadership, was in my direct supervisory leadership and the leadership above that person. Just like in student services, the anger towards those situations have persisted because I think about what wrongs were. And to this day, I still run into some of those folks from that academic department. I still run into some of those folks from student services. And whenever you see them in the room, you could really literally cut the tension with a knife. The tension is just there. It's still thick and still very present. Unfortunately, the dynamics of feeling persistent anger and injustice is not just reserved for the halls of higher education. They're also in the criminal justice reform and reentry space. It's sad to say that there are bad apples in the 2 fields that I care so passionately about, that I care about the outcomes of the clients we serve in criminal justice and for the students that we serve in higher education. But, is this really unique to just higher education in the criminal justice reform space? Absolutely not. There are plenty of good and bad people in many fields. There are plenty of good people in a lot of fields, just like there are great real estate agents, there's great police officers, great chefs, great customer service representatives, great flight attendants, but also there are great people in those fields. All of you who are listening right now who work in those fields and many more probably know that there are also horrible real estate agents, horrible mechanics, horrible chefs, horrible doctors, etc. So, there's good and bad everywhere. But this past weekend, I was on social media and I was watching a video by an individual who had worked in the criminal justice reform space. He calls it one of his rant videos. But I respect him very much. I respect the work he's done, and I respect his story and what he's been through. He was, of course, very truthful in what he said, and he left no prisoners in his rant. But also in his rant, he offered solutions, connections to make things better, and thoughts that can make one ponder what should be next. When after he spoke, I shared with him a direct message. I shared with him my experience at one of the organizations that I worked in and how I still have anger towards my direct supervisor in that situation. I might have shared in past podcasts um, how I worked at the Fortune Society, and this experience that I'm going to talk to you about happened at the Fortune Society. And this is not so much an indictment of the organization as a whole, but certainly an indictment of the person I worked directly for at the time. In 2005, I was denied the ability to use all of my vacation time at one time, and even petitioned to use to have unpaid time to spend the summer with Julian and Anamdi. At that time, they were young. Julian was wow. Julian was 10 or 11. She might have been. I think she was 11, and Namdi was 10. And or but they were very young. And during that time, I wanted to spend that time with them because I was going to be, summertime. I had my custodial time with them. Mom and sis were already in Florida, and I knew I couldn't do the optimal custodial time with them with me being in New York and having no one to really watch them. So when I made the request, I was denied. I was denied by my supervisor. And when I was denied, I said, well, if I can't do it, I'm just going to resign. And I resigned I put in a 2 or 3 month notice of resignation. And then there was a chain of events that caused a bit of a stir because I was very honest. The word was getting out, like, why are you leaving? And I was very honest. I said, well, I'm working with single fathers to bring them back in their children's lives, but I'm being denied the ability to do that with my very own children. I'm helping single fathers reconnect with their kids, but I can't do that myself. Ultimately, the word was getting out. And of course, my direct supervisor felt the heat, and she was directed to fix it. And then she was overridden in her decision as far as the granting of my vacation and my unpaid time. So then I decided not to resign, and then I had that precious time with Julian and Anamdi. However, when I returned from that vacation, my mother warned me. She goes, "It's going to be tough when you get back." Mom couldn't have been so right. My direct supervisor was making life so difficult for me. She was seeking to use any organizational means at her disposal to make me seem more disgruntled than I needed to be, uncooperative, unproductive, and really incompetent. Now, I was certainly disgruntled because she was just being a difficult person. A difficult person. Oh, I don't know if I could say difficult person. She was just being a complete jerk. Because I think that would be an insult to difficult people if I classified her as that. She was being a complete jerk. That's the best way to say it. A complete 100% jerk. But I lasted close to another year at Fortune. And I didn't leave because of her. But I was at the place where me being around my family, me being around them was just that much more important. And when I think about it, I lived on my own and was going back and forth on my own in New York at the time. So not too dissimilar than how I'm doing it here in Florida. So I feel it when, the absence of the family is there. So, I might be similar to my mom in that way, that I like family being around me. That just helps. And when I think about people being in the way of me being connected with my family, and I recollect that story, I get a little tight. But as it pertains to the story at Fortune and that direct supervisor, I ultimately got what I wanted. And and it wasn't a one-way street thing. I was a good employee for Fortune, so I gave them what they wanted as well. They got good work out of me. Now, the last story I'll tell was when I served on the board of directors for a criminal justice reentry organization here in South Florida. At first, the dynamics in which I was recruited, the person, invoked the name of somebody I respect very much, and they wanted to recruit me to work with them and be on the board and things of that nature. Them and one other person recruited me pretty aggressively. And at first everything went smooth. I could tell there was a little quirks going on, but listen, not everybody's monolithic. So, there's going to be things along the way. But the rubber hit the road when I was started to ask to assist in the development of a reentry curriculum, a reentry program that the organization wanted to offer. And that's when the butting of the heads took place right away, because how I saw it should be done and how he saw it should be done, certainly we were in different places. And on his part, their part, there was a lot of passive aggressiveness going on, and hard conversations were taking place back and forth. Now, ultimately, I did not need to have my way in that situation, so to speak. But I felt like, let's at least come to a meeting in the middle. But the way in which the other side was going, it was almost like you had to completely submit to what it is that they wanted. You had to completely not question what it is that they wanted, or you had to be out, or that you were done. And, we're working through this. There's still a lot of tensions. Funny enough, I met my real estate agent that helped me buy this condo through that organization. So something definitely forever good came out of that. But when it was time to renew the board via vote, my real estate agent had already left. He said, okay, I'm done with this. I felt like I needed to write it out and work towards the mission of what it is that we were doing. Before I knew I wanted to eventually leave, but I said, let me not leave just yet. And I could tell when it was time to renew a board of directors via vote amongst the board of directors, these two guys really did cook the books. They maligned my reputation enough to other people to say, let's vote Richard out. And at the end of the day, I was voted out. And at the end of the day, serving on the board was not that important to me, because other board of directors have continually and still recruit me right now to try to be a part of their criminal justice reentry organizations, which I'm fine with. But ultimately, serving on the board was not that important to me, especially in this particular organization. We were not really getting much of anything done. But the problem I had with this individual, and really it was two individuals that really started this process, is that the same way that you're aggressive in hiring me or recruiting me or bringing me on, you should be able to have that man-to-man talk, that if you see that I'm not doing what you wanted to do, we're not in agreement, then you know what, be a man about it and say, you know what, Richard, this isn't working out. Maybe we should try something different. I'd be okay with that. But you can't have a man-to-man conversation when one person's a man on my end and the other people are boys or less than men or passive aggressive or different things of that nature, where they're not upstanding people. So you can't have that dynamic when that's not happening. And dynamics not working and the people not being upstanding, it makes me think of one last story. This is the last story of this week, I promise. The last thing I could say, or the last story I could share with, is about my condo association. I serve as the vice president on the board, and I could say that we've had difficult issues that we've had to govern with. In the state of Florida, there's a rising cost of insurance because of so many insurance companies leaving the state. It's resulted in a lot of assessments and being placed upon buildings. Ours has not escaped that dynamic. But when we have voted on insurance, and a lot of it is that now because of the Surfside incident that you might have seen on television, the law has now become more strict in requiring different types of inspections and inspection certifications for the safety of the building. But unfortunately, no matter what votes we take, I'm always on the losing side of a vote. We had our insurance canceled earlier this year, and when I talked to my insurance agent who insures my unit, I was telling my board that we should at least, check out alternatives. And they were like, nope, we're not going to do it. We're going to renew the insurance, apply this assessment, and call it a day. My insurance agent correctly predicted that the policy that we were signing was going to be canceled within 2 months. And sure enough, that's what happened. The same insurance agent that came with us same insurance agent that insured our building said, okay, well, we're going to sit there and come up with another policy again because quote unquote market conditions have changed and we could do this and we could do that. And it's hard. We still couldn't get our 40-year inspection because it's not because we didn't want to get it done, but because of legislation here in the state of Florida, the ability to get these inspections done and the engineers available is the perfect train wreck of too much demand and not enough supply. Unfortunately, this also comes with the insurance agent, including the insurance agent that's insuring our building, trying to take advantage of people's fears and not letting them shop around. Listen, his job performance, the insurance agent's job performance, has been horrible. He did not service our building well. To me, if we have the chance to shop around, let's at least shop around. It costs us nothing to look. But even though I said that, our board continued to vote against its own interest, against shopping around or seeking the opinion of other folks. You don't have to seek my opinion, even though we correctly predicted that the insurance first policy would cancel. Seek the opinion of your own insurance agent that insures your own building. Shop around. It costs nothing to do that. And stop voting against your own self-interest. Or maybe you just want to vote against Richard. I firmly believe that some of it is just voting against me because this goes back to the issue I had with my impact windows. And I had to show the board I was successful in defending my position on the impact windows by showing them that based on my approval and based on the bylaws that we have, that I was in my right of the type of windows that I installed. Maybe they didn't like the fact that I pointed out to them that they weren't even aware of their own bylaws that they took an oath to uphold. Wow, that's a lot. That's a good bunch of stories. I wouldn't say good, but that's a nice amount of stories that that have brought me to persistent anger still to this day, because I feel that there was injustices going on me at that point, and I'm sure that you have dynamics going on in your world that make you feel similar in the same way. Some folks might say right now listening, oh, Richard, that's nothing. If that's all you're going through, then you know what? I'll take your life. But, or they could be going through worse, or they may not, or they may say, Richard, I don't have it as bad as you. I am going through worse. But as we know, all pain is personal, and the comparison of pain doesn't necessarily make us feel better. But as I'm in the midst of these things that are keeping me persistently angry and I'm working through those things, maybe you're at that place too. And it's something it's something you have to work on every day. It's something I have to work on every day to stay away from the trash and the negative stuff that's holding us down. I was looking for some ways to how we could deal with this negative stuff. And psychology today gives us 9 ways to proactively deal with and shift away from anger and injustice. So, of course, as always, the researcher in me will definitely share these dynamics with you. Number 1, have some compassion for yourself. Recognize always that you're doing the best in a difficult situation and focus on your compassion so there's less room for anger. Number 2, decide that it's just not worth it. When you find yourself thinking about the injustices of being wronged, remind yourself that by staying focused on injustice and anger, you are unwittingly doing harm to yourself. You could acknowledge past harms and prevent these past harms and at the same time, prevent these past harms from maintaining power over you and contaminating your present experience. Number 3, I love this one. Anger and feelings of injustice beget physical pain. Anger causes increased tension in the body, and this does increases pain. Have you ever felt that when you feel so angry, like you could just feel like things are going bad? Anger is associated with increased inflammation in the body, which could worsen pain in your overall health. Feelings of anger and injustice can keep you focused on what's wrong and who's to blame. Remind yourself that focusing on it gives it more energy than it needs to have. Number 4, choose to be empowered by separating the facts of the situation from your emotions. While you could recognize the anger in a situation, I could recognize that I had bad faculty. I recognize that I had a bad staff in general advising. I got to release that anger. I got to work on doing that. While I could be clear and I could talk about those things that were not fair, I have to now say I'm going to separate the feelings of injustice from it. So I'm not feeling wronged or victimized. I just say this is what happened and that's it. I just leave it at that. Number 5, seek treatment modalities that melt anger and feelings of injustice. Seek a professional mental health professional. Have them say, hey, can we participate in cognitive behavioral theory, acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction, loving kindness meditation and compassion meditation, all those things that could help. Number six, the relaxation response is an antidote for anger. The relaxation response could effectively counter the physical and emotional tightening that happens when you feel anger or injustice. When you just say, it's funny, my quarterback for the Jets who got hurt, Aaron Rodgers, on the first four plays of the season, last season when he was with the Packers and things were going bad, he'd always tell everyone, just relax, relax, relax. And, I had a friend of mine used to say that too when I was growing up, and I didn't really understand the concept of that. But sometimes taking that deep breath and relaxing is the perfect antidote for quelling that anger. Number seven, positive imagery can help you disengage from negative thought spirals. Breaking the cycle of injustice really does require shifting your focus when you observe your thought patterns in action. And when I sit here right now, even as I sit here and talk about the podcast with you, I look outside and I see beautiful greenery, beautiful palm trees, go to the beach, see beautiful oceans. The seawater therapy helps. That positive imagery, looking at the pictures on the wall, looking at the pictures of the kids, pictures of my mom and dad, pictures of my sister, my niece, and the Wonder Twins, that positive imagery helps disengage from negative thoughts. Number eight, have patience with yourself. It could take time for the emotions to lessen, but really encourage yourself to soften in each and every moment. Remember, 1% each time. That has that improvement. Some days will be easier than others, but have compassion for yourself as you move through the process. And that goes into the last thing for number 9. Don't stay stuck. If you feel yourself stagnating, confine your focus to countering the physical and emotional tension. Make sure you counter that by using the relaxation techniques, the visualization techniques, the meditation that helps with that. Every time you see that happen and you sit there and counteract it with something more positive, it'll set the foundation to be able to get past these things easier, quicker, and better. Getting through this negative stuff is an everyday process. It's everyday work, but do a little bit of time on it every day. Do that 1% a day. You're good by 30% by 1 month, by 60% another month. It takes some time. You get through it. And you'll see you would have mastered those negative feelings and eliminated them. Oh, thank you for spending so much time with me. I know we did a little more extra time than we usually do today, but I really want to thank you for always sharing your time with me. You're sharing your time with me here at Second Chance Coaching is precious to me. And I know it's precious to you, otherwise you wouldn't spend it with us. Continue please to spread Second Chance Coaching to your friends, family, and loved ones. I know that we're doing something positive here that's touching your lives. And let me say again, I'm so appreciative as to what you're doing, because no matter how much you think I'm touching your life and what we're doing here touches your life, you are indeed positively impacting my life. And I cannot express my appreciation. My appreciation goes beyond words when it comes to that. Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to spending time with you next week. Thank you again for joining us here at Second Chance Coaching. In addition to coaching services for individuals and businesses, I'm also available for speaking engagements and workshops on criminal justice reentry, human resources, as well as organizational culture and leadership. Feel free to email me at richard@secondchancecoaching.com, as well as connect with me on Instagram at @DrRichardLewis. Remember, every day you are given this opportunity for your second chance, and I know you'll make the best of it. I love you all, and I look forward to connecting with you next time here at Second Chance Coaching.